Anyway, I'm very happy to have Oshrat Ayalon here. She's visiting from Tel Aviv University, graduating soon. She's attending SOUPS, and so this was a great way. She's giving a bunch of talks around the country, right? But we're very fortunate to have her here. She's been doing research on user-centered privacy. I don't know if you'll get to it, but she's also getting interested in working with younger populations and privacy for children. So I'll mention that just in case you don't get into it.
Right.
But I think without further ado, I think I'll let her go ahead. But please welcome Oshrat.
Thank you. So thank you for the introduction. And I'm very, very excited to be here today. So yes, I'm going to talk about user-centered privacy by design. But before that, a little background about myself. Okay. So yes, I'm coming from Tel Aviv University. No, this is not Tel Aviv University. So this is Tel Aviv Beach. And I spend most of the time at Tel Aviv University, from which you can see the beach if you stand in a very specific spot. So I really enjoyed Tel Aviv University. I'm going to, there is a background here. You can see it. I see it in my computer. So I guess some of the pictures are unseeable, but never mind. So I'm going to speak about two studies that I conducted recently during my dissertation. But I will tell you also about other studies that I was involved in and led these studies. So this is a short background. So the first study I was involved in was about managing longitudinal privacy in online social networks. And the background for this study was the information persistence and the information accessibility long after it was first published in social networks. So what we did, we asked, we wanted to compare users' sharing preferences, referring to their Facebook posts that they had posted in different periods of time. And we found that that the users were less willing to share older information. So on the one hand, we found a significant decrease in the willingness to share, but we can also you can also see that the decrease is not very dramatic. So our takeaway from this study was that we should supply the users with tools that will allow them to have a fine-tuning of their longitudinal privacy management. And for example, just deleting everything that might be considered as too old probably won't be a good idea. We need to supply something which is more fine. So the next study that I did, it's already part of my dissertation study. So the motivation for the dissertation was help developing systems that are more privacy respectful. And the first step we took was to understand the developers themselves, those who developed the system. And in this study, we conducted interviews with software engineers. I wanted to understand their privacy perceptions and privacy practices. And one of the findings, by the way, do you hear me? Okay, thanks. So one of the findings was that the developers are guided by the organizational privacy climate. So it's not just the organizational privacy policy, but also the way the developers perceive the organizational attitude toward privacy. And we found that there could be a positive climate in which the organizational care about privacy, and so the developers act in a way that protect the user's privacy, or a negative climate. The next study, we further explored the developers' privacy practices. We did that using a survey study in which we wanted to understand what are the factors that affect the developers' practices. So we did a regression analysis, and I will present two factors that we found as significant. The first one was, again, that organizational privacy climate. A positive one resulted in more privacy practices that the developers took. And also, we asked the developers to think themselves as users. Obviously, they're developers, but they also use information system as well. So we found that their personally perceived information control, whether they think they have whether they think that they can control the information, also affects their practices as developers. They took more steps as developers as well. And the next two studies I'm going to present during my presentation. So in the first stage of my dissertation, we focused on the developers. At the second stage of the dissertation, we got back to, I'm saying got back because my very first study was with users. So in the second stage, we focused on the users because we want to help developing systems that are privacy respectful, but taking the user's perspective. So we did two studies. One was about personas, which I'll present, and the second was AP testing, which is playing with the word, with the term A/B testing. But I will just go ahead. So, okay. So the background for my whole dissertation is privacy by design. And the idea of privacy by design is to implement privacy solution from the very beginning of the information system development. Instead of adding layers of privacy after it's already built, it will cost more, and it probably will be not as good if you start from the beginning. So the idea of privacy by design is a very important approach, and it's part of the regulation. It's part of the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC. It's also part of the EU General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR. So it's important. On the other hand, like everything, there are also criticism. And for example, Wong and Mulligan, they criticize privacy by design by saying that usually when they refer to the design in privacy by design, so people take a narrow legal perspective. And they suggest to take a human-computer interaction perspective. For example, looking both at those who are using the system and also those who develop the system. And in our study, we focus on the users from privacy by design perspective. So privacy by design, they also take care of the users, the individuals, and they really call to protect the individual privacy. For example, what we see here, this is a screenshot taken from ECO, it's UK's Information Commissioner Office. And they explain in this screenshot how should we do this by, in practice, they are referring to privacy by design. So what I want to show here that also in privacy by design, they refer to the individuals. It's not just our approach to take care of the users, but the difference is that they are looking at the individuals from the organizational perspective. They're not calling to involve the users in the development process, which is what user-centered design is about. In user-centered design, this approach calls to involve the user during the development process. For example, we see in this diagram that the users are also at the beginning. When designers involve the users, they observe them, they ask them questions. This is the beginning. And the users are also involved in a later phase of the development when they are asked to test the prototype. So you see the difference between looking at individuals from organizational perspective and comparing to involving the users in the process itself. So what does it mean privacy by design in practice? So organizations need to comply with the regulation. As I mentioned before, it's part of the GDPR. And what they do in practice, they do a process that is named privacy impact assessment. This is one way to comply with privacy by design. So privacy impact assessment is an organizational process in which it's helping the users, the organization, I'm sorry, to identify privacy risks and to minimize them. And one of the ways that they are doing that to identify those risks, they are suggested to do information flow, to analyze information flow. And when we look at information flow, again, from user-centered design approach, we understand that it's just not enough because we're doing that without involving the users. We think that more is required than that. So an example of what's happening if we're not involving the users during the development process. So what you see here is a screenshot of Facebook Messenger as it used to be in 2015. So back then, the messages were automatically sent with their location. So if I got the message, I could simply press on it and to know the sender's location. So users complained about it, and after they complained, Facebook changed it. What we want to know how we can avoid similar cases from the first place, how we can implement privacy by design process and to take the user's expectations into consideration. And we're doing that, as I already mentioned, by taking a user-centered design approach. So in its origin, user-centered design mostly dealt with usability. because it was understood that those who develop the system cannot foresee all the possible scenarios that end users will encounter, so they need to involve the users. And with privacy, we are saying it's the same. We need to involve the users because those who develop the system cannot tell in advance what will be the user's privacy expectations. In user-centered design, there are several methodologies that help us to involve the users, including A/B testing, personas, and others. And in the first study that I'm going to present, we focused on how we can involve the users in privacy by design. How can we do it in practice? And that will be the first study that I'm going to present. It's about framing system privacy design using personas. Okay, so this is our motivation. We think that users should be involved in privacy by design processes. And then we have two questions. The first question, how can we involve the users? And the second question, which users should we involve? Do they have special characteristics? And I will start with the how question. And this also has two questions. If you want to involve the users, which measures should we use to involve them? And how can we involve them in practice? Okay. So in terms of which measures should we use, we chose to measure the user's perceived system appropriateness. In appropriateness, I am referring to, we're leaning on Helen Nissenbaum contextual integrity theory. And in contextual integrity, in order to analyze whether privacy violation had occurred, we're doing analysis of the information flow appropriateness. And to know whether it was appropriate, so we're doing this in the light of the norms and in the light of a specific social context. In our study, what we did when we're saying that we are measuring the appropriateness, we want to know, we want to use it as an indicator to know if the users think that a certain privacy design meets the user's privacy expectation. So this is what we're going to measure. And so now we need to know how we can measure it. And we're again taking a user-centered design approach, and we're going to refer to several aspects based on this approach. So the first thing we referred to was empathy, which is a central concept that is considered in user-centered design. When you say empathy for designers, it usually means that they want to know what are the user's needs and their experiences and their abilities. So this is from the designer's perspective. We want to know if we can also use empathy for the users, because we're going to turn to the users. So this is one concept that we're going to take into consideration. And another theory that we're going to lean on is the framing effect. In framing effect, one of the questions that this theory tries to answer is whether if we present something in a particular way, will it affect the explored outcome? And in our study, it will be, we're going to see if we're going to frame something in a more or less emphatic way, will it affect the user's perceived appropriateness? So taking empathy and framing effect together in the context of user-centered design brought us to consider personas. And in our study, we will use personas, and personas in user-centered designs are theoretical, hypothetical archetypes of users, and these users share the same goals, for example. So in our study, we will use personas, and we want to know if we're going to frame something user personas, will it affect the user's privacy, the user's perceived appropriateness? Last thing, still answering the question of how we're going to involve the user. So we want the users we want to measure the user's appropriateness of a given system. And we want to do that while reducing as much as possible the user's personal benefit of the system. So in order to reduce in order to make them to think less about their own benefits of the system, we're going to ask them to take someone else's perspective. And I will get back to it when I will show you the study that we took. Okay, so we answered the how we're going to involve the users. Now we want to know if there are certain users that we want to involve in if there are certain users, do they have certain characteristics? Okay, I will read that we'll focus on that for a minute. So you would need an engineering degree from MIT to work this. So this quotation was taken from, took place in the 80s, and it referred to a digital watch. So in user-centered design approach, what the designers are asked to do is to take the user's perspective and to take into consideration their needs and abilities. Another approach that they can take is named I-methodology approach. And in I-methodology approach, the designers or the engineers take themselves as representative users. Okay, so if you're an engineer and you think yourself as one of the users, then you get a product in which only engineer can use. And by the way, so that quotation was taken by Donald Norman, and he said that even though he had engineering degree from MIT, he couldn't figure this digital watch as well. Okay, so that was a very dramatic case. So in our study, we want to know if taking an I-methodology approach what will be the implication of privacy by design case. So to do that, we're going to also explore two variables of the users. So we're going to explore the academic background of the users, and we're going to see if the users have engineering-related work experience, will it affect their privacy, their perceived appropriateness of a system. So this from the I-methodology approach, and we also explored two other personal variables, including personally perceived privacy and personal empathy. Okay, so to be formal about this research objective. So the first objective of the study was exploring whether information framing affects the perceived system appropriateness, and we're going to do that by confirming different levels of persona presentations. And the second objective was exploring the effects of personal and professional aspects, again, checking the perceived system privacy. So what we did. Okay, so this study included 3 sub-studies, and I'm going to focus on 2 of them. So the first one, in the first one, we recruited the participants through Amazon Mechanical Turk, which I assume you're all familiar with, right? And the second study, we recruited students from Tel Aviv University. And the methodology used for both studies was almost identical. Okay. So we had a between subject user study in which we had 3 conditions. I'm reminding you that we want to test the framing effect of personas. So we had 3 different conditions. The participants were told that they were asked to imagine that they work in an application company, and they will be shown with several designs, and they're asked to express their opinion about the design. And then after that background, they were shown with 5 different scenarios. And now I will show you exactly what they saw. It will be to be clear exactly what it means. So this is one scenario. They were presented with 5. For example, so they were shown with the application name, then a screenshot, then a short explanation what the application does. For example, Refit is a fitness application, and it helps the users to follow their activities, including following their location. The next step, after having a general idea of what the application does, they were presented with a specific case study. And this part, I don't know if it's working, never mind, there. So this part was different between the 3 conditions, the way the specific case study was framed. Then they were presented with a question following the general idea, the general description and the case study. They were asked questions, and I will read it so we will know what is the direction of their answers. Okay, so as a team member of the M company, I think it is okay that once a user shared his or her fitness activity information with another user, the app shares future activities by default. Okay. So now if someone said that it is okay, so the participants think it's appropriate. So from a privacy perspective, if he or she thinks it's appropriate, so they're less critical about the design. And I will show you the 3 conditions that we have. Again, we want to explore the effect of framing effect with persona. So one condition which we named as data. It was just a very dry explanation of the specific case study, no personas at all. Then we had a second condition, which we named as basic persona. And it referred to the same case study, but this time it was presented from the user perspective. Okay? It was presented by an end user's quotation. And the third condition, which we named as advanced persona, we used the same quotation as the basic persona, and we also added some more information about that user, including a photo and short biography. So these were the three conditions. What did we get? Okay, so it's really funny with the colors. So first, we found significant difference between the conditions in the system appropriateness. Okay, so we found that it was different. And now at the second stage, we want to know between which condition there is significant difference. And we found that for both personas conditions, they were both significantly different from the data condition. Okay, they were less, the participants found it less appropriate in the case of personas. And this is the advanced and the advanced personas and basic personas. What we did not find is a significant difference between the two personas conditions. Okay. At the next stage, we wanted to explore if we can. We wanted to explain appropriateness by exploring all kind of factors. And I'm going to present the study that is based on the results that are based on the student sample, because with the students we can also explore the professional aspects that I mentioned earlier. So what did we find? Similar to the graph that I showed you before, we found that the persona presentation reduced the system appropriateness. Okay, so users were more critical to the design when it was presented with personas. We found also that the participants' personal perceived privacy had a significant effect, but in a contradicting way. So if the participants felt that he or she has more privacy, so they found the design as more appropriate. Okay, so as for the professional aspect, so with the major field, we had two groups. One group was consisted of students that their major field was engineering or exact sciences, and the other group was all other. So these two groups we had. And with academic background, we did not find significant difference between the groups in terms of appropriateness. With the next professional aspect was about, we had three groups. Okay, so we had, we asked the participants whether they had relevant experience, relevant to the, we asked the participant if they had work experience related to their field. So we had two groups saying either engineering, yes, I have, I have experience related to engineering, also or other. Okay, so these are two groups. And we also had a third group in which the participants said they did not have any work experience relevant to their study. In this case, we found that participants who had engineering related work experience found the design as more appropriate compared to those who did not have work experience. Okay. As for empathy, we did not find that whether people were more or less in general empathy, it did not affect the privacy, the perceived appropriateness. And the last thing that we checked is we checked interaction effect. And we found that in the case of basic personas, so with basic persona participants that had higher privacy perception, it reduced their perceived appropriateness. Okay, all clear now? Okay. Okay, so to summarize the results. So the first thing that we found that yes, if we're framing the design using personas, the participants found the design as less appropriate. They were more critical. We found that participants with engineering related work experience found the design as more appropriate compared to those who did not have work experience, relevant work experience. And lastly, we found that if the participant had had higher privacy perception, find that the design as more appropriate. What can we learn from our results? So going back for the study motivation, we said that we want to involve the users. So following this study, we know that if we do want to involve the user, we should have the human perspective, and showing that it should be there if we want to have a critical view of the user. The second thing that we learned from our results is related to a professional aspect. So this study was taking place with users, but we also we learned something about information flow in general. And as going back to privacy impact assessment, I mentioned that it mostly leans on information flow analysis. And even when we're taking internal analysis, for example, without consulting the users, even then we should somehow bring the human perspective to the developers. And the last thing that we are learning from the results that yes, users should be involved. And we're saying that based on the results in which those who had engineering related work experience found the design different than end users. So if we're not involving the users, we're getting designs that will not meet their privacy expectations. Okay, so that was the first study in which we learned that yes, we should involve the users. Yes, we should do it while having the human aspect, but we still don't have a measure for the developers to know what users think of a given design. So this is the one thing that we're still missing. And another thing we're still missing, and well, measuring privacy, what kind of privacy? It's a big thing, and I will get into the details of the difference between institutional and social privacy in the next study that I'm going to present. And the next study is about A/B testing. I will get back, and I will get into it now. Okay, so again, this study as well, the background that we're taking is a user-centered design background. There is something here in the back. And in this study, we're going to focus on A/B testing methodology. Which is part of the user-centered design approach. Okay, so A/B testing, I'll get a short explanation. I'm sure that most knows what it is about. It's about comparing between different options. And in design information context means compare different design options in which each design have a very small difference between the design, and we want to explore how these differences affect a given outcome. For example, in this case, buying a product. So we're going to do the same with privacy. So we want to test different privacy design and to see how this design affect a given a certain privacy score. Okay, so we will compare the privacy score, and we'll see how the different design affected. So the first thing that we had to answer, what is this privacy score? So there are privacy scale, and we're going to see what will be the best option. Okay, so the first thing we did, we went to read lots of privacy scales literature, and we found that in general, they can be divided to two types of privacy scale. And the first scale is many times measure the individual privacy perception, right? But that's not what we want, because we want to measure system privacy, not personal privacy. So we're going to use it, but it's not what we need. And the second type of privacy scale really did refer to information privacy scale, to system privacy. But in many cases, these scales refer to concerns related to information between the user and the system. And it refers to institutional privacy. Not too many scales refer to privacy concern that related to users in the system, which refer to social privacy. So previous studies that we read in the literature were not exactly what we needed for our study. So we developed the scale ourselves. Okay, so I mentioned something about social, institutional, and I want to get into the details of what's different between institutional and social privacy. So from online social network study, they found that users' concern can be divided largely to these two types of privacy concerns. So with institutional privacy concerns refer to the users' concerns referring to companies, for example, Facebook, Google, whatever, and their possible usage of the user's personal information. This is institutional. With social, it refers to information access as it's done by people, family, friends, colleagues. So this is the difference between social and institutional. And when we came to develop our own scale, we considered all kinds of aspects as we saw in the literature. So the first thing was referring to popular privacy construct scales. So we refer to scales construct referring to privacy control, risk, and others. And we also took into consideration the difference between social and institutional privacy. Again, so to be formal about this study research objective. So the first objective is was developing framework for evaluating the user's privacy perceptions of a given system. And you will see that the framework consists of dedicated scale and using A/B testing. Then we want to evaluate our suggested framework. And the last thing, saying that, knowing actually that there is a difference between social and institutional privacy, we want to know if our suggested framework is applicable for these two aspects, social and institutional. So what we did. So first, our study was mainly, can be largely divided to two phases. The first phase was about developing the scale to know what is this privacy measure that we're going to compare. That was the first phase. And then based on the first study results in which we're going to have a scale, we're going to use A/B testing to see if we can differentiate between privacy design. Okay, so the participants in all this study, in all the sub-studies that I mentioned, all the participants were recruited by Amazon Mechanical Turk. Okay, so I'm going to go really quickly about on the first phase. I'm not going into the details of this study. So it was consisted of two studies in which we started from 47 questions, and then we conducted all sort of statistical analysis in order to reduce the number of questions and to check the scale's reliability. So we conducted, for example, principal components analysis and exploratory factor analysis and all other statistical methods. And then the result was Users Perceived System Privacy Scale, or UPSP scale. So this scale consists of 27 questions, and these 27 questions are distributed between three distinct constructs, and the constructs were institutional, risk, and social. And I will give an example of for each question for each construct, as you know what's about. So on the right, you will see the loadings as it resulted from the exploratory factor analysis. And I will go over one question from each construct. Okay, so the first construct is about an institutional construct. So I believe I have control over how my personal information is used by X. Okay, so X is the tested system. Okay, so this is about institutional. And then we had risk. Considering the information I provide to X and the people who might see it, I think it would be risky to give my personal information to X. This is risk. And the last one is social. It looks easy to restrict unintended people from viewing my personal information on X. Okay, so this is the first phase of the study. It was resulted in the scale, and it consisted of 27 questions. So this is the first study, the first phase. Then we use this scale that we just developed to do use the scale to do A/B testing between designs. Okay, so to do this, we want to allow developers to test the user's privacy. So it will consist of a measure of what is privacy and using A/B testing. So what we did here, we presented the users with application, with a given design, and then they were asked questions as we just found in the scale. Okay, so we had 5 background scenarios, and it was consisted of social and institutional, meaning we had 3 scenarios in which the privacy issue was social. The privacy issue was about information flows dealing with users in the system. And we had two scenarios with institutional privacy aspect in which the problematic information flow was between the user and the system. So we had 5 background scenarios. Per each scenario, we had 2 different designs. Okay, one was more privacy respectful than the other. Altogether, we had 10 conditions, and each participant was exposed to one of the options only. Okay, and again, I will show you exactly what the participants saw, so it will be more, I think it will be more clear. Okay, so the participants were presented with the application name, a short description of what it does, and a screenshot. So that was the beginning. And then they were presented with specific scenario, and this scenario was different, and followed by a screenshot I will show you. And this case, and this scenario was different between the 2 conditions. Okay? It reflected a different design. Okay, so I said that we had 3 social aspects and 2 institutional aspects. So here was an example of what it means by social privacy aspect. So in this case, the iFindRest is an application that allows the users to find restaurants based on their location and to make reservations. So they will explain that if it's marked in in green, then it means that someone from their contact list who also have that app on their phone is going to be in the restaurant in the same hour. Okay, this is what the green means. Now we had two designs in which the intrusive design was said exactly who is going to be there based on their contact list, while the respectful design, they could tell that someone's going to be there, but they couldn't tell who. Okay, so this is the difference between the conditions. So this is the social privacy aspect. And we also had institutional privacy aspect, again, 2 designs. What you see here is it's a chat. And in the respective design, okay, no, in the intrusive design, I'll start with that. So the chat is about flying to Spain. Yeah, okay, so the chat is about flying to Spain. And inside the chat, we see an ad, a great suggestion of flying to Spain. This is the intrusive design. While in the respectful design, it's the same chat, but this time the ad, it's outside of the chat and it really has nothing to do with flying to Spain. Okay, again, we're seeing inclusive design and respectful design. Okay, that was the study. What did we get? Okay, so what we did to analyze the study results, we did t-test between the design per each subscale. Again, with the scale, we found 3 subscales: institutional, social, and risk. So we did t-test between each score for each scenario. Okay, and the way the graphs are arranged here is based on the main social, whether the privacy problem was social or institutional. Okay, this is what we see here. So the first thing that we see that in the case of social aspect, we found significant difference between the design. Going into the details for each subscale, we find mixed results. For example, in the iFindRest, the example that I showed, we found significant difference in the risk subscale. So the participants found the privacy respectful design as less risky compared to the intrusive design. In other cases, we found different results. For example, in another one, we found that significant difference in institutional and social aspect. And in another one, we found, again, only significant results only in the risk subscale. But this case, it also was interesting because we found that what we considered as respectful design, so the participants found it as riskier. So they surprised us. In the case of institutional privacy aspect, we did not find a significant difference between the design in any case. That was our result. Okay. So to summarize this study result, so first we found that if you ask users about system privacy, it consists of 3 distinct aspects: institutional, social, and risk. And when you compare design, we found that they don't have the same strength. It's not It's not that they found that it's bad for all cases, institutional privacy and rest. Okay, we saw mixed results in this case. And again, another thing, when comparing designs, we found that we found significant difference between the designs only in the case where the privacy was about social aspects. What could be, okay, so what we were interested in terms of analyzing the result, what could be possible explanation for what we saw? Why participants found the difference only in the case of social privacy aspects? So one possible explanation is the scale. It might be that the scale is not sensitive enough, unable to differentiate between institutional cases. So when we developed the scale, we want it to be general, to be generic. So it could fit any system, any case, either social or institutional, but it might not fit institutional aspects. Another option that we only had 2 institutional examples. If we had another one or another example, we might have another outcome. And we also have another possible explanation. So in user experience field, we have something called perceived affordances, in which the users, the affordance is referred to what a thing should be doing. So when we're looking in cylinders, really it's not very obvious what we're supposed to do with them. However, the affordances of these switches is quite obvious. We see something, we know we're supposed to press on it. Okay, so this is with user experience. So a possible explanation might be privacy affordances. And in privacy affordances, we're referring to the ease of understanding the privacy aspect of a system. So with social aspects, they might have a better privacy affordances in which the users understand what's going on. Because with social privacy, they are using social application, they're using it, they're both audience and publishing. So if they see that they can see someone else's information only by clicking, so they understand that similarly, the other person can see their information as well. On the other hand, with institutional privacy, the affordances are weaker. It's really the users, including me, it's not very easy to understand what's going on with the information flow. Okay, so it's weaker. It's weaker and it's harder to understand. So it might not be that it's not necessarily that users don't care about institutional privacy, rather they just don't understand. We're not expressing it good enough as we do with social aspects. Okay, so based on the study results, we developed A/B testing, which is a platform that allows others to do the same thing that we do with their system. Think of Facebook. If they had A/B testing in 2015, they could ask the users what's better. And this platform allows developers, researchers to bring the screenshot of their system, and then it also includes the scale that we developed. So to summarize all the presentation, so we want to bring user-centered design to privacy by design. And we found that, yes, we can use user-centered design to privacy by design, but currently it seems like it mostly fits social aspects. And the implication that, yes, please, what we call is please involve the users if you want to develop systems that are privacy respectful. You can use A/B testing and use user-centered design approach. And that will be it. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. I think we have enough time for a good number of questions. So please start thinking of questions. I have a couple to get started. Okay.
And I will get to you because I have hearing problems. So I just, the best way to understand, to hear you is just be close. And I go back and forth. Yes.
Okay. My question would be, you let the participants know it is about privacy.
Okay. So the question was if we let the participants know in advance it's about privacy. No, we did not. We recruited the participants generally, not mentioning privacy at all to avoid bias, recruiting people that only care or not caring, or that recruiting people that care about privacy. So we really avoided that. Yes.
I have a question. So in your lecture, I think at persona slide, you mentioned that user involvement is really important.
What? Yes.
Yeah, and then, but I think that, but if the users involved, depending on, we can predict the user's behavior, how they're gonna use the application, like you said, that is a more increased like privacy concern.
I didn't. If I involve the user, so why?
So, like you said, you don't know in the discussion session, you don't know how users' behavior, how they react with application or app. So, my question is, increasing user involvement, that is also increase privacy concern.
I still don't understand why, if I involve them, it increase the privacy.
Because you can predict the users how they're gonna behave, and then they don't have a previous question, they don't have a concept about privacy, and then if you said involvement for user, that means you can have more risk.
Maybe you get like a more of a bias, like if they know that you're studying privacy, maybe they tell you they're more worried about privacy than they actually are.
Okay. So first there is in the second study we saw that the personal perceived privacy affect the system privacy, the system perceived privacy. So yes, we see that their personal privacy really affect their perception. So what we're saying that, so what I understand for that is we should take this into consideration when we recruit the users. So either we can either somehow generalize the results, or we can recruit in advance people that care more or less of privacy. But we definitely should take into consideration their privacy personal perception. That we learned that from the second one. But I still think that if we recruit them, we still learn something, but we just need to take that into consideration when we analyze the results. That's what I think. Yeah.
In the first study, when you were mentioning them looking at where it showed data and then the persona uses, you said there was a distinction between the personas and when they didn't have personas, their choices. Was there a big distinction between when you had the personas and then the advanced personas that had the pictures and the bio?
No, we did not have a difference. We did not have significant difference in this case. So what we expect, one second. No. Let's see. You're referring to the difference between the advanced and, okay. So we did not find significant difference between the two. We expected to find difference because with persona theory in general, they suggested to having more information for thinking of designers and the real purpose of personas, to have more information for the designers, and that's why the persona should be like a real archetype for users. In our case, we didn't find any difference between the two. We had all sort of thinking of why. One thing that we thought about, that maybe adding that information, maybe people were less empathic. Maybe, I know, all the personas were female students in Arizona. Maybe, I know, for some reason, it reduced their empathy, because we see it's not significant, but we see it's lower. I mean, they found it less appropriate in the case of they found it more appropriate in the case of advanced personas. But it's just a speculation of what happened there. We don't really know. Yes. Yes, I'm sorry.
How do you motivate organizations to implement user-centered design? And the second one would be, what is your take on privacy paradox? Because users might say that if we design system in a certain way, it might be privacy preserving, but they might not use privacy preserving.
Okay. You're referring specifically to the personas? Okay. Okay, so the question, how can we motivate organization and take away, referring to privacy paradox. So motivating organization, well, I think of usability long time ago because when who cared about usability? So what we think that similarly, although it's not part of the regulation to have systems that will fit the user's expectation, people care about it. I just giving an example, Telegram. Oh yeah, we want Telegram because it has it's more protective. So if people care about it, this is my motivation. Go and ask them what they think of your system. In terms of privacy paradox, you're right. It's weakened our results because they might report one thing and then behave other. But this is one of the study limitation. So we can reduce we should take this in less as strong as it's in here and taking this into consideration.
But I also think that just because people say one thing and behave in a different way doesn't mean that they don't actually want privacy, because the end behavior is like a function of many things taken into consideration. And yes, many times you just decide to sacrifice your privacy because that's the trade-off. But that doesn't mean you don't want the privacy. So I don't know. I think you can ignore their behavior in the design and actually see what they really want, perhaps. And
again, taking contextual integrity in this context, so they might give away their privacy in one context, but definitely not in another one. So this is again another thing of why not thinking only of behavior at one specific case. Yes.
So this is from Samir, who's off-site. He asks, how would this work address the trade-off between business needs and privacy? And do developers have the requisite decision-making power when usually it's management that makes architectural decisions in the development process?
Okay. So as for the business, okay, so privacy is one thing out of other. We know that when business have other aspects when they refer to when they develop when they develop the product. We understand that in this study we focused on the privacy. And again, going back to the question as before, we still think we do think that encouraging organization to develop products that will fit the customer privacy expectation eventually will do good to the business as well. Yes.
I wonder if organizations will more like do, I don't know, playfully call it AP hacking. Basically, because a perception of privacy doesn't necessarily reflect what actual privacy might be. So Facebook might just be like, we're not actually going to change what we do, but let's keep doing AP testing until users feel very comfortable and think that this is a very safe place. But actually, we haven't changed anything. We've just changed their perception. So,
so in this,
a measure of the actual privacy of the system.
So we're not measuring we're not measuring the actual privacy. We're definitely measuring the privacy perception. But I will add that in general, the whole dissertation is also always with the GDPR in the background. So this suggestion is on top of the GDPR. So first thing, if you're supposed to collect less data as part of the GDPR, we come on top of that, okay? It's like taking care of the user's perceptions as well and following the regulation, which is supposed to take care of the real privacy, whatever it means in terms of data collection, placing the information in a safe place and others. So this is on top of that. And as for the developers, so it's easy to say that they just do whatever they're told, but I think it's way too simple to say that. And in practice, they really do those who do the develop in practice. And if we, and this is one thing along the way of making system more privacy respectful. We're not saying that they are the only one, but it's another place in this very long chain of system development, and we're taking care of that one too. But it's not just that, but they also mean something in the context of developing systems that are more privacy respectful.
And how do we handle the complexity of communicating the several levels of privacy, especially in institutional privacy?
That I agree, and we saw that this is this specifically with institutional seems to be harder. We might need to think of something else which is not like in the user-centered design approach. Say, showing mockups might not work. So either we should think of new ways to express what's going on in terms of institution and what's going on with the information, where it goes, and we should think of new ways to involve the users. And definitely it sounds like a very great someone else's dissertation.
Also, what is your opinion on, given it's the same premise, like given the complexity of information with institutional privacy, do you think it's the user's responsibility to be completely aware of these, or should there be another watchdog body?
No, it definitely can't be only the user. I don't think we put too much on the users if we think it's only them. But it's going back like, I don't know, 10 years ago when Facebook is here more than 10 years, but thinking of like 10 years ago when everyone published whatever they wanted on Facebook, right? Oh, who cares? But now people are more restricted, right? So I think of social privacy 10 years ago and it changed, right? So I think that we can think of the next 10 years, things might change as well in terms of institutional privacy.
So we have lunch mostly arriving over at the IoT house, and we can continue all these conversations for another hour if everybody would join us in thanking our speaker.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And then